Hi students, welcome to another note video. Sorry that I couldn't be there to do these notes with you, but I figured instead of just giving you the slides to copy, I'd actually talk about these notes with you because, like I said, this unit is probably the most difficult because there's a lot of new vocabulary and complex ideas to understand, and I want to make sure that you really got this because this is about our government, how it works, and it affects your life every day. So I just wanted to make sure you really got it, so make sure you're paying attention and you follow along. You will have a quiz on these notes, so again, listening is a good idea. So make sure you're following along, filling out the blanks as we go. And our first slide has a video on it. I'm not going to play the video for you because it doesn't really work when I'm doing this screen recording. But I have put links to all the videos directly into your notes. And again, even though they might be funny or cheesy, I think they're just really great ways of explaining the topics we're covering. So check this one out. It's super cheesy, but it does talk about the branches of government and who has the power and all that kind of stuff. It's pretty funny. So check it out. But getting started, right, in our last notes we talked about the Founding Fathers trying to figure out what kind of government we were going to have, right? They had debates, they made compromises, some sketchy compromises, but regardless, they made a document, the Constitution, which just explains how our government works and the laws of our government. And basically, when they set up our government, they created a federal system where power is shared by the federal, that's the national government, and the state government, because they realize we can't just have individual state governments doing whatever they want, because then we're not a united country, and there's this whole issue again of when we go to war, are we going to unite, how is that all going to work, just like last time. And so that's why we have this national government. That's where everybody comes together, representatives from each state, and they make laws and things that are going to affect all of the states, all of our nation, right? But some powers are just kept to the states, and the states get to decide. So we'll talk about that on our next slide. So delegated powers are the powers that are specifically given to national government, and it makes sense if you think about it. So coining money, that means creating money, right? If each state had their own different money, which they did in the beginning, it's really complicated, right? If you're just crossing state lines, you'd have to have new money, and we're all one country, so that's really confusing. So that's why that power is left to the national government, right? That's something that makes sense. It's one of those things that, yes, it makes sense that we all would have this in common. And trade as well, right? We're a whole country together trading with other countries, not just states trading with other countries, because we're a united country. Hopefully that makes sense. So reserved powers are the powers that are given to the states specifically. So things like creating local governments that affect your local community, holding elections, schools, public schools, those are all regulated by the state, not the national government. That's why if you have a friend in another state and they're in 8th grade, they might be learning a different topic than you, completely different topic, because the states get to control what you learn. And concurrent powers are powers that are shared by both the national government and the state government. So things like taxing, right? The state of California has certain taxes, but then our national government also has certain taxes. That's why, depending on different states you go to, the tax rate might be different. Things like borrowing money are shared by both national and state governments, and enforcing laws, right? That's tricky, right? If you commit a crime in a national park, you're following under national laws, right? Versus if you commit a crime just in a local community park, you would be held accountable by that community in that state. So there's that as well. Just don't commit any crimes. That's the solution to that. So here's this little chart kind of showing again the three different ways power is shared, right? Our national government is the one who declares war, right? States can't declare war because that would make absolutely no sense, right? The state of California declares war on, I don't know, North Korea. It's not going to happen. We're a united country. And then concurrent powers are the ones we share, and again, these are the ones that are reserved to the states, things like public schools, healthcare, safety, all that kind of stuff. Okay, so now we're going to jump into the branches of government. And I know in our last notes we kind of touched on it, but we're going to get more in depth into each branch of the government and what powers they have and who is in those branches. So the first one we're starting with, left to right, is the legislative branch. So the legislative branch is made up of Congress. If you saw that on the little chart, you can also look on the wall, right? It's made up of Congress, and their main powers are that they make the laws. That's pretty important, right? They can also override a veto. So when they make a law, it goes to the president's desk, and he, or one day she, has to sign it into law. And if he doesn't want to do that, he can veto the law and send it back to Congress, but they could override that veto if they have enough votes. And the legislative branch, Congress, also creates our country's budget, which, let me tell you, is a complex, complicated thing in recent years, right? The government has sometimes had to shut down because Congress couldn't figure out the budget quite right. Their mightiest power, so like their most important power, you could say, is power of the purse, right? They control the money, they control where the money goes. And they also have the power of the sword, meaning only Congress can declare war, right? We've had presidents in the past who have made statements, like to the public, about that we needed to declare war, but only Congress can officially declare war. That's not a power of the president. This is the legislative branch. Other powers, they have to confirm all presidential appointments, meaning, right, if the president is picking like a Supreme Court justice or someone to be the head of the agriculture department, he can nominate people, but Congress is the one who gets to vote and decide if they actually agree with that person. So this is why it's really important, like it's helpful when a president has a Congress that he can get along with, and because he's affected a lot by Congress, and also like a Congress that sort of votes and feels the same way he does, because otherwise there's a lot of clashing and a lot of things are not going to get done well, and it's going to take a long time. So how the legislative branch is divided, I'm going to go back to that chart really quick. You see it has two different houses. So that kind of goes back to thinking about that compromise, right? It's the Great Compromise, where the larger states, they wanted it to be based, right? They wanted representation in Congress to be based on population. But the smaller states said, no, we should all have an equal say. So they created the Senate, where each state, right, has equal representatives in that part of the government, and the House of Representatives is based on population. So back to where I was, I will talk first about the House of Representatives. There are 435 members. It's capped at that number. It's not going to get larger than that. And how you determine like how many representatives you get for each state is based off of the census. That's why the census is so important. It comes around every 10 years and you're supposed to fill it out and then answer questions about yourself. But it helps us get more representation, or possibly, I guess, less representation if people leave the area. To be in the House of Representatives, you have to be 25 years old. So that's pretty cool. You can be a lot younger. You have to live in the state you are elected in, and you have to have been a citizen for 7 years. So that's kind of cool. You don't have to be born here to be in the House of Representatives. You just have to have like applied for citizenship, been a citizen for 7 years, and you only serve a 2-year term, but you can go through, you can continue to be elected, gosh, I don't think there's a limit on it, as many times as people want to re-elect you. So even though your 2-year term, you're up for a re-election every 2 years, you can keep serving many terms. So I put this guy up here because this is our local representative, Duncan Hunter. He represents the 50th District of California. So going on to the next slide, this is his district. I don't know if you can see the map very well. Most of you probably fall in his district if you live in Escondido or Valley Center, even San Marcos, all the way out to like Ramona. You can kind of see how crazy like the lines are. So here's some other districts where different people represent him. And you see he represents all the way down to Lakeside and Hamul and Alpine. That's actually where Duncan Hunter is from, is Alpine. And you guys, even up to Fallbrook and parts of Temecula. So he has a very large district. Most representatives don't have this large of a district, but you have to know like out here there's not a lot of houses out in the east part of his district. But regardless, he has a very large district. So jumping to that other house, so we just talked about the House of Representatives. Remember, that's based states get that based off of their population. Now we're jumping over to the Senate, and this is right where every state gets 2 people, so therefore, do some math, there are 100 senators, because we have 50 states, okay? So 2 from each state. To be a senator, you have to at least be 30 years old, you have to, again, live in the state you represent, and you have to have been a citizen for 9 years. So again, you don't have to be born in the United States to be a senator, you just have to have been a citizen for 9 years. They serve a 6-year term, but they can also serve an unlimited number of terms, so you can keep re-electing them many times, right? Dianne Feinstein has been our senator for a long time. A long time. I can't even tell you how long. And before that, she worked in the California state government as well. Actually, she witnessed a murder in our state government. But that's a story for another day. And our other senator, who is our most recent elected, she's our newest senator, is Kamala Harris. So both of these ladies represent the U.S. represent California in the Senate, right? So each state has their own senators. These are our senators. So still in the legislative branch, right? Still talking about Congress. We also have the Speaker of the House. So in the House of Representatives, this person is like the head of the House. He's supposed to get all the things done, move things along, and he is elected by the House members from the majority party. So if there's majority Republicans, they get to vote for him. If there's majority Democrats, they get to vote for the Speaker of the House. But this is our current Speaker, Paul Ryan. He is retiring soon. So we will possibly have a new Speaker of the House very soon. So again, his job, make sure the House of Representatives gets laws passed quickly. Also, we've got the U.S. Vice President. And it's kind of weird. You'd be like, why is he under here in the legislative branch? Because if I look on the wall, he's actually in the executive branch. Because he does kind of have a job. He gets to serve as president of the Senate, right? So Paul Ryan, he gets to be the president, like kind of like the president of the House. We call it the Speaker of the House. He's in charge of the House of Representatives. All those 435 people, yes, he's supposed to try to get them to do stuff. And then Mike Pence, our current vice president, is president of the Senate. So he's just got 100 people that he is kind of supposed to oversee and help move things along. He doesn't actually get to participate in any of the debates, but he can break ties on votes. So that's pretty important, right? If they're locked 50-50, he gets to have the deciding votes. Both houses do most of their work in committees, and each committee studies certain types of bills or suggested laws. So you might have a committee on like homelessness, and that committee, their job is to try and come up with laws that are going to hopefully like deal with like the homeless situation and try to help homeless people. So in these committees, that's where they sort of debate, come up with these like laws, create these laws, and then they have to bring them to the House of Representatives and have a vote and see if people agree with the law that they're trying to create. So here's some pictures. This is, a lot of people think this is the White House, but this is not. This is the Capitol building, and this is where Congress meets. So the Senate meets over on this side of the building, the House of Representatives meets on this side. If you've ever seen those like pictures or videos on TV and it looks really boring, like there's a lot of people just around sitting and doing nothing, they're actually not. They're actually voting and working on laws for our country. And if you ever go to the U.S. Capitol, you can actually sit in. Up here are just regular people, and you can just sit in and listen to the people debate. I got to do it. It was really cool. I'd highly recommend it if you ever get to go to Washington, D.C. So our next branch is the executive branch. And this branch is the one that has the president, technically the vice president, even though he had some jobs over here, remember? And then we've got his cabinet. No, not a literal cabinet, like where he stores his clothing. This is a cabinet. It's a group of people that are heads of different departments in the government. So, executive branch. What's their main power? They carry out the laws. That means they make sure, right, these laws that are created in the Congress, They make sure that these laws are followed through and that they are like going to happen. They can also veto laws, so they can cancel a law, right? If they don't like a law that Congress passed, he can cancel that law. Their mightiest power is the president is commander of our military. That's why traditionally throughout history there have been a lot of presidents that have served in the United States military, because that's one of the jobs of the president. He's head of our military. Other powers, he can issue executive orders, which technically kind of are like laws. He can appoint Supreme Court justices, but they have to get approval by Congress. They also appoint cabinet members, again, have to get approval. Ambassadors also have to get approval by Congress. And they can pardon those convicted of a federal crime. Ooh, that's a interesting one. There have been presidents, right, who have actually pardoned other presidents. That's another little side story for you that you'll have to look up related to Richard Nixon. That's a story for another day. Okay, so to be president, you must be a native-born U.S. citizen. That means you were born in the United States, or you were born on a United States military base. Technically, if you were technically born in another country, but both your parents are American citizens, you are also an American citizen. So all of those are fine ways as long as you were born a citizen. If you had to come here and apply for citizenship, then you cannot be president. You also have to at least be 35 years old. They want you to kind of have some age on you. Hopefully have some more knowledge. And you have to have been a resident for 14 years. So what that means is, like, you could have been born in the U.S., but you moved away young and didn't really grow up here. So that's what the whole resident for 14 years. They want to make sure you've actually lived here for some time. Yeah. So a president can still only serve up to 2 terms, and each term is 4 years. So do some math, 8 years total, but they have to be reelected for that second term. And the 22nd Amendment limits this. So notice it's the 22nd. So it's going to take some time before we amend the Constitution to say you can only serve 2 terms. Over here, a little fun fact for you, is our longest serving president, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, also known as FDR. He was elected to 4 terms. 4 terms, but he died during his 4th term, so he wasn't actually able to finish it. But after him, we were like, that's a little bit too long. I don't think that we should have a president for that many years. And the reason he was so beloved and reelected, he was the president that helped get us out of the Great Depression, and then helped us fight through World War II. And so a lot of people really respected him, and that's why they continue to reelect him. So the vice president does take over if the president dies, resigns, or is removed from office. We've had some deaths, right? So that's happened where a vice president has taken over, and we've had a resignation as well where a vice president had to take over. So, and then the president, also part of the executive branch, is his cabinet, which there are 15 departments that support the president, and the head of each department is chosen by the president. So think of transportation, education, agriculture. These are all departments in the government, and the president gets to pick who's in charge of those departments. So there you go. Here's a little picture for you that kind of shows most of our presidents. Our current president isn't up there yet, but I thought it was a fun little infographic kind of showing you. Yeah, look at this guy's in the bathtub over here. There's a funny story with that guy, but that's a story for another day. Okay. There's lots of stories for another day here, aren't there? So, something important is, you can be removed from the presidency if it comes to that. The House of Representatives has the power to impeach the president. Impeach does not mean to remove from office. Impeach means we're going to put you on trial and determine if you broke the law. So impeach just means we're putting you on trial. Doesn't mean you're removed, just going on trial. And this is if you did a serious crime, not if you got a speeding ticket This is like, did you like embezzle money? Did you try to like secretly spy on the other party while you were like running for re-election? Because that happens, guys. That happens. So it has to be a serious crime, and the House of Representatives are the ones who get to bring the impeachment charges, but the Senate actually is the one that gets to vote and decide if they want to actually remove the president. So we have had 2 presidents impeached, and one who would have been impeached as well, except he resigned before they could put him on trial. So our 2 presidents that have been impeached, again, they only went to trial. Neither of these were removed from office. The first one is Andrew Johnson. He was president after Abraham Lincoln, when Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. And he was a very strong Southern slave-supporting Democrat. I'm pretty sure actually he was a Democrat. And he just had some sketchy dealings with some political party members, and I'm not going to go too far into detail with it, but anyways, he was impeached and found not guilty. And the second one is Bill Clinton. He was also impeached. Not going to go into the details of that one, but he was also found not guilty. I also included a little link on here for you. This is an optional video. I'm not going to require it, but if you've ever wondered what the Electoral College is, it's how we elect the president. And I'm not going to dive too much into it in like these notes at all, actually in this unit at all. That's probably something you'll learn more in 12th grade, but if you ever wondered like what is that, check out that video. Okay, so moving on to our last branch, the judicial branch, and that's made up of the Supreme Court and other federal courts. They're the ones who interpret the laws, so let's read about them. The main power of the judicial branch is they interpret the Constitution, they protect rights, and they uphold the Bill of Rights. Their mightiest power is called judicial review. What that means is, so Congress creates this law that says all people who wear red socks have to pay a $10 fine. It goes to the president's desk, he signs it off, he's like, I agree with this. Now it's going to go to the Supreme Court, and they're going to determine, well, if someone makes a fuss about it and doesn't like this law, they could bring it up to the Supreme Court, and if they choose to hear it, they can review the Constitution and determine if this law violates the Constitution. And they might say, you know what? The Bill of Rights protects freedom of expression, so we're going to say that that law is canceled because it violates the Constitution. So there you go. Woo. Yeah, so that's their mightiest power is judicial review. They get to review laws and determine if they're constitutional or not. Other power, they can also revise law to make it constitutional, so they could have changed that if they wanted. And this map is showing you the breakup of, remember how I mentioned the smaller courts, like the Court of Appeals? So these are how those are broken up, and I'll explain more on the next slide about that. Or maybe it's on the next slide. But all federal courts and Supreme Court are part of this branch. 9 judges sit on the Supreme Court. There are always 9. If one of them dies, if one of them retires, then we have to get a new judge because there's always 9. And this is kind of cool for you guys. There are no specific constitutional requirements for becoming a judge, meaning there's no age requirements. There's no requirements about citizenship. So, hey, you could be a Supreme Court judge, but good luck getting the president to nominate you, and, right, Congress has to approve of you as well, so good luck with that. They are appointed by the president, and they get to serve for life. They are never elected by the people. We don't really have a say, except, right, we can tell our congressmen and women that we don't like them and don't confirm them, but they get to serve for life. So justices in the past that have not served for life have either retired, or they had an illness so they had to leave, like cancer, or some have just literally served until they died. Pretty crazy. Here are 2 famous Supreme Court justices. Thurgood Marshall was our first African-American justice, and Sandra Day O'Connor was our first female justice. These justices are no longer on the Supreme Court. but they were some of the first, to break some boundaries there. So how does it work? How do you get your case to the Supreme Court? Here's how it works, if you've ever wondered. Because you can't just, like you and I, we can't just walk up and be like, here's this case, we want you to hear it, go. First, you have to go through your state or federal court. If you lose that, then you can appeal to the Court of Appeals. If you lose that, then you can appeal to the Supreme Court. But not so quick, buddy. The Supreme Court only chooses to hear important cases that they think are important. Like literally what they think is important. If you come up with some like court case where you're like, my teacher won't let me eat Takis in class, I can tell you that they're going to reject that because they're looking for important things like I was trying to pick nothing too controversial, but we'll talk about this one, right? The Supreme Court heard the case of Brown versus Board of Education, which said, hey, actually, I'm pretty sure it's illegal and against the Constitution to separate kids in school based off of their skin color, right? You can't send all the black kids to one school and all the white ones. That's not okay. The Constitution wouldn't allow that. So that case went before the Supreme Court, and they were like, yeah, we totally agree. Well, I don't know if all of them agreed, but they had enough majority votes that they said, yes, you cannot have segregation in school. All kids of all colors can go to school together. So they only hear about 100 cases a year, and it's ones that they choose to hear. So now that you've learned about all three branches, which one has the most power? Legislative, executive, or judicial? Oh, what? It's a trick question? No branch has the most power? Oh, Miss Collins, what are you doing to us? Yes, true story. No branch is supposed to have the most power, right? That's why the Founding Fathers split power among 3 different branches. They all oversee and check each other in different ways, which I'll get to in a minute. Here is a cool video. This one I want you to watch about how power is divided in the U.S. government, so make sure you check that out. And moving on, we already talked about in our last notes how the Constitution, they immediately created a Bill of Rights, which are the first 10 amendments. And remember, an amendment is a change to the Constitution. So these are the first 10 that are kind of added on because people said there's nothing in the Constitution that protects people's individual freedoms, like our freedom of religion, right? That's so important to us. Think about the colonies and how many people came here for religious freedom. So that's an important thing that was not in the original Constitution. So, Bill of Rights, these are so important, you guys, because these are your rights. And if you don't know your rights, like, you could be taken advantage of. You could be arrested, and you don't know your rights, and so you're just going to, like, blah, tell them everything, and then you're going to end up in jail. And so don't do that. Learn your rights and protect yourself. So here's the first one. First Amendment protects freedom of religion, press, speech, assembly, and petition. Assembly means to like gather and protest. You're allowed to gather and protest. Petition means you can like write to your government, to public officials, and complain about them and get them to try and do something. The government cannot interfere in religion or declare an official religion. We can express our own ideas and views. However, this is so important, you cannot say anything you want. Slander, libel, or anything that endangers public safety. You can't run into a movie theater and yell, fire. That's illegal. And if you try and say it's protected under freedom of speech, there have been several Supreme Court cases that have gone through that say you can't say whatever you want, especially if it endangers people, or slander or libel. Like, if you damage a person's like reputation on purpose, you make up lies about them to damage their reputation, and it like damages their company, they lose money. Those things you are not protected from, and again, you could go to jail, you could be fined. So you can't just say whatever you want. So be careful, right? Be careful when you're on the internet and you think that you're protected because you might be like anonymous. You're never anonymous. Let me just tell you that. You leave a trail on the internet wherever you go. You're not anonymous, and your words are traced back to you and can greatly affect you. Even the things that you say now, right, could come back later in your life. And like, just be careful, you guys. Be so careful about what you put on the internet, what you say, because your words have power. So, did I get everything on there? Oh yeah, I did. Okay, amendments 2, 3, and 4. So, we've got the right to bear arms. That means the right to own a weapon. This was obviously very important to the colonists because they wanted to protect themselves from the British. No quartering of troops, that's Amendment 3. Remember, the British forced us to house soldiers in our homes, and we were like, no way, Jose. And so we made sure we added an amendment that you never have to house military in your home. And Amendment 4 is no unreasonable searches and seizures. So what that means is you can't just search someone's bag without a warrant. Just be aware that on school property, that doesn't apply to you, right? You're losing some of your freedoms by entering the school building. So just be aware you can be searched. Again, all of these are very influenced by disputes with colonists and the king. For example, the king took weapons from local militias. They forced colonists, I already said this, to house British soldiers. And they searched and took property without permission. So it's kind of crazy to see these things that we hold so important today, right, our freedoms, and that they actually came from like conflicts that the colonists had with the British. Okay, so Amendment 5, 6, 7, and 8 all provide guidelines for protecting the rights of the accused. So if you're accused of a crime, these amendments are really important to understand. You have the right to due process in a jury, meaning you can't just sit around for years in prison. You have to have your case like processed in a timely manner, and you have the right to have a jury hear your case, not just a judge. A jury, a group of people can determine like if you're guilty or not. And you don't have to testify at your own criminal trial. That's pleading the fifth. If you have information that will incriminate yourself, you do not have to say it. Did you hear that? You do not have to say it. If you did something wrong, like committed a crime, and if you say something that's going to incriminate yourself, you can say, I plead the fifth, and you don't have to say it. But be careful, because obviously people then think that you have something you're hiding. Also protected under these amendments are double jeopardy. You can't be tried for the same crime again. So once they find you not guilty, you are not guilty for that crime. Property cannot be taken without due process of law. You have the right to a speedy public trial and an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided to you. That's so important, right? If you are ever arrested or the police want to question you, you have the right to an attorney. You do not have to talk to them. You can say, like, I don't want to speak to you until my attorney is here. Because an attorney is going to know your rights probably even better than you do. So I would wait until you have your attorney there to protect you. And you have the right to know the charges against you. So they can't just throw you in prison and you're like, what happened? I don't know what I did. They have to tell you why you are being arrested or being put in prison. And you have the right to have your case in front of a jury, I already talked about. Other things that are protected under these amendments, no unfairly high bail. That's the set of amount of money that defendants pay to the court if they fail to appear in court at a proper time. So like you commit a crime, your bail set to like $500 million. They can't do that because it's unfair, too high. And ban on cruel and unusual punishments, meaning like if you stole a candy bar, they can't say we're going to hang you over a pit of piranhas and let them slowly eat away at your feet. That would be cruel and unusual, so I'm pretty sure, so you can't have that happen to you. Amendment 9 and 10, these ones are important because they protect the other rights not addressed in the first 8 amendments. So they say just because a right is not listed here, that doesn't mean that people don't have it, so we can still add more rights on in the future. And also, some rights are reserved to the states, and the states get to decide the rights that you have. So it's just saying you have more rights than the ones listed here, so don't worry. And here's another little video for you. I'd suggest you check it out. The link is in your notes. It's all about the Bill of Rights. Okay, so really quickly jumping on to talk about citizenship, because this is part of our unit, is there are two ways to become a citizen. So one, if you are born in the U.S. or any U.S. territory, or if you're born in a foreign country and at least one of your parents is a U.S. citizen, then you are still a U.S. citizen. So let me explain that again. So you can be born here, as long as you're born here. Like, even if, like, let's say your parents are from Spain, they come to the U.S., the wife is, super pregnant, and she accidentally goes into labor here and has her baby here. Her baby is an American citizen. It might be a Spanish citizen too, depending on Spain's laws, but it's an American citizen because it was born here. So if you're born here, or you're born on an American military base, because that is still part of, like, technically you're on American soil if you're not an American military base. And then also if you're born, let's say you're born in Spain, but your mom is an American citizen, then you have American citizenship as well. You can also become a naturalized citizen. That's where you were born in a foreign country and your parents are not citizens. Then you have to go through a process before applying for citizenship. So, like, this is like what my grandparents did and my uncles. They were all born in Europe, and when they came here, they had to become naturalized citizens. They lived here for a certain time, and they applied and went through the whole process of earning their citizenship. So, and important to talk about immigrants and the rights that they do or don't have. So legal immigrants, so immigrants that come here like with documentation provided by the government, they have many of the rights and responsibilities of citizens, but they cannot vote or hold public office, right? You have to be a citizen to do that, because you have to have learned our laws and policies and things like that. And also, even if you're a legal immigrant, if you break the law, you can still be deported, because, again, you're not a citizen, you're just a visitor here, and so you can be sent back to the country that you are from. Legal immigrants over 18 may request to be naturalized citizens after living in the U.S. for 5 years. So, an example of a naturalized citizen was Albert Einstein. He was German. I'm pretty sure he was born in Germany. And he came to the U.S. and lived here for 5 years and then applied for naturalization and became a U.S. citizen. And to be a U.S. citizen, to go through naturalization, you must have financial support. So to prove that you'll be able to take care of yourself, you must agree to follow the law, to support our Constitution, to understand basic written and spoken English, and show knowledge of U.S. history and government. I should give you the quiz. Seriously, I should give you the quiz that naturalized citizens have to take, and to see if you guys could do it. It would be interesting. Or how many Americans could actually take that quiz and pass it. Hopefully you guys could. You also must take an oath to the U.S. that you'll, like, serve and protect our country, and you could lose your citizenship if you committed a bad enough crime. It would have to be really bad. Like, it would have to be pretty bad to lose your citizenship. And you cannot be president or vice president because you're a naturalized citizen. You weren't like a natural born. You're a naturalized. So, duties of a citizen. As a citizen of the United States, it's important to know you are supposed to obey the laws. That means knowing what they are and staying informed of changes. If you get pulled over by a police officer and you say, I didn't know the law changed, they're going to laugh at you and write a ticket and say, not my problem. You're supposed to learn them. That's your responsibility as a citizen. And no teacher is going to teach you that. You're going to have to, as you're an adult, you're going to have to read it and learn it on your own. So welcome to the real world, kids. You have to pay taxes, and taxes go towards things like public roads, police, towards my salary, right? Public schools, teachers. So that's some of where your tax money is going. You also are supposed to defend the nation. So to my boys in the classroom, when you are 18, you must register with the Selective Service. So in the event that we were in a war and the president initiated a draft, you could be required to serve in the military. The last time we had a draft was, I believe, for the Vietnam War. both of my, actually, all three of my uncles were drafted into the military in Vietnam. And I'll have to tell you about my uncle's crazy story about the draft. Remind me to tell you about that in class. But all three of my uncles were drafted and had to serve in Vietnam. So we haven't had a draft since then. That's like the 1970s. We haven't had a draft since then because we've had so many people like want to sign up and be a part of the military. So just know, boys, you have to do that. And if you are ever summoned for jury duty, it's mandatory that you serve. So it's your public duty, and you could technically try and get out of it a couple of ways, but they're pretty strict on it. So you could even like face a fine if you don't show up. So there's that. And rights of a citizen. Oh, perfect. This is my last one. So these are rights, like things that you can choose to do but are not required to do. Vote. Oh my gosh. I can't even preach this enough. Like, so many people, you guys, died and fought so that we could have a chance to have a say in our government. Like, it doesn't matter if you're a boy or a girl. You get to have a say in your government once you turn 18. You can still have a say right now, but just you can't legally vote. But I just think it's so crazy how many people died for us to have this right, and there's people that don't appreciate it and don't take advantage of it. And so I will stress this even more in class. Voting is such a privilege, and I just highly encourage you to vote once you're 18 and for the rest of your life, as long as you are sound of mind and able to. So in order to vote, though, you need to make sure that you learn about the issues and the candidates before you vote. So you need to do a little bit of research. I promise it's not that bad. I'll show you how to do it in class. You can even, again, these are rights. These are not things you're required to do. You can campaign for different candidates or issues that you're passionate about. You can join an interest group with other people who share similar like political views as you, and you can try to like get different laws like presented to Congress and say, hey, we care about this. You should vote on it. You can write letters, email, fax, or call your representatives and city council members. Again, I'm going to give you a lesson in class on how to contact your representatives. It's so important. They're supposed to listen to you. They're paid to listen to you. And you can also and should volunteer in your community. It's called community service. And you'll be required to do some of that in high school. So get used to it. So thanks for sticking with me through these notes. I know that they were a bit long, but it's because this is such an important topic, and I really want to make sure that you get it. So thanks for following along, and I will see you